Traversing the halls of the National Gallery in London, as we might with any other museum or gallery, we're most likely drawn to the heavy hitters. Works attributed to household names that border on the mythological. Works that we often see reproduced in postcards, tote bags, and posters in museum gift shops. And while seeing these is certainly a must, we may develop a blind spot to the lesser-known masterpieces that we walk past en route to the greats. Today, we will highlight some of these incredible pieces that are equally extraordinary, hidden in plain sight. As someone who spends hours looking at art, I've recently started using LG Gallery Plus on my LG TV. It's a service that turns your screen into a digital canvas, featuring over 5,000 curated pieces that range from classical masterpieces to modern photography. What I appreciate the most in LG Gallery Plus is the National Gallery's content. When you click on the National Gallery shelf, you can experience selected artworks that are actually on display at the museum, brought vividly to your TV screen. It's an experience that can transform your home into a gallery in an instant. It's quite fitting that LG is a partner for this video, since their Gallery Plus service actually features the works we'll be looking at today, directly from the museum's collection. And on that note, let's take a closer look at these masterpieces. Somewhere in London in 1768, inside a private home after dark, a group has gathered to witness a scientific demonstration, perhaps to learn from it, perhaps to be entertained by it. The painting is an experiment on a bird in the air pump by Joseph Wright of Derby. The title tells us exactly what it is we're looking at, a very real experiment from a century prior that was done by the scientist Robert Boyle. The glass vessel here is connected to an air pump which removes the air from inside it, creating a vacuum. Inside the vessel, we can see a cockatoo, and as the air is slowly drawn out, the bird begins to suffocate. Its fate rests in the hands of our central figure operating the pump. His fingers hover over the stopcock that would release the air back into the chamber. If he removes it, the bird lives. If he waits too long, it dies. A candle, positioned here behind this jar, is the sole source of light in the room. It's illuminating our subjects' faces, but equally it cloaks the rest of the room in darkness. Wright uses a technique of chiaroscuro, the sharp contrast of light and shadow, to heighten the drama of this visual story and to direct our attention. He guides our eyes to the expressions and gestures of each person gathered. The two girls here were the ones I noticed first. The eldest turns away, covering her eyes, while the younger clings to her sister, frightened and seeking comfort. The man beside them, likely their father, does not console them. Instead, he seems to urge them to look, to learn a lesson about nature, to learn this lesson about nature. To the left, a couple looks at one another instead of the experiment. They are absorbed in their own exchange. The boy below them leans forward. He is at the edge of his seat, intent on the finale that is to come. To his right is a man sitting rather dispassionately, holding a pocket watch, waiting for this to end. On the other side of the table sits another man, his gaze lowered in thought. He too is not looking at the experiment, but seems absorbed in contemplation. Perhaps he's considering the deeper philosophical implications of the scene before him, man's power to control life. And then there's the final figure here, partially concealed in the shadows. A young boy tugging at a bird cage hanging above the scene. Is he preparing the cage so the bird can be returned safely? Or is he lowering it because it will soon no longer be needed? Wright leaves this unsettling ambiguity for us to wrestle with. Notice the circular arrangement of the figures. This compositional choice, common in 18th century painting, draws us in. We, the viewers, become the 11th participant in the room. At the time Wright painted this piece, he was living in London and moving within circles that included some of the most important scientific thinkers of the time. Among them were Erasmus Darwin, the physician and grandfather of Charles Darwin, and Joseph Priestley, the chemist credited with the discovery of oxygen. Darwin and Priestley were a part of a group called the Lunar Society, whose meetings Wright attended as a non-member. Their discussions reflected the broader intellectual movement known as the Enlightenment. which came from the scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries. It was driven by the belief that the natural world could be understood through observation, reason, and experimentation. And unlike mythology or theology, science yields repeatable results. So Wright alludes to this intellectual spirit in this painting. The moonlit sky visible through the window might be a reference to the lunar society. The candle illuminating the scene can also be read symbolically, its flame suggesting the light and enlightenment. The skull here at the front, interpreted by some as memento mori, a symbol of the inevitability of death, sits alongside the fading candle and below the struggling bird. What we see here goes beyond the scientific experiment to include the human experience beside it. Like our subjects, we too might feel fear, curiosity, discomfort, or even indifference, but also perhaps something deeper. The uneasy awareness that knowledge itself can carry consequences. Like the figures gathered around the table, we too are left to decide how we feel about what we see. When we look at Flowers in a Vase from 1685, painted by Ruysch, we might first notice that it's a simple still life of a bouquet on a stone ledge. But if we linger a few seconds longer and look closer, we can see that Ruysch is doing much more than simply arranging flowers on a canvas. She is choreographing a scene that blends scientific observation and her own unique imaginative invention. Here, spring and summer blooms are together in the same vase. Peonies, viburnum, hawthorn, honeysuckle, and columbine exist alongside martagon lilies, seed pods, and wheat. These plants could never coexist at the same time in reality, yet through her preparatory sketches, she brings them together in a tableau shaped by her will. Ruysch was one of the most successful flower painters of the late 17th and early 18th centuries. An incredible accomplishment given that the art world was not yet easily accessible to women artists. Her father, Frederick Ruysch, was a botanist, anatomist, and a keeper of Amsterdam's botanical garden, which was a center of horticulture study and experiment. Through his support and position, she had direct access to specimen blooms, imported plants, and the small creatures which she also included here, a grasshopper, the caterpillars, and the ants, rendered with the same care as the flowers themselves. The scene is lit from an unseen light source from the upper left corner, as indicated by the shadows here. It catches the pale pink and white petals and gives them a luminous quality against a dark, shallow background. The sage green pistil at the center of the large peony anchors itself against the upward motion that's created by the wheat stem above and the spilling over of the white and yellow honeysuckle lower down. Step back and the hawthorn dissolves into small white points, but moving closer and you see the meticulous attention given to each tiny bloom. Despite the sense of weightlessness that possesses each floating petal and leaf, the composition is actually quite structured. Look at the diagonals, the line that moves from the wheat to the peony and then down to the honeysuckle, or the one that runs from the hawthorn to the red peony bud receding into the shadow. These intersecting lines, along with the sophisticated choices Ruysch has made in depicting light and color, give the scene its stability and allow the flowers to appear light without losing form. And so we can see that the flowers are not only objects, they are narrators. They tell us about the abundance of nature, the passing of time, the cycle of life. Even the bite marks left by the insects are deliberate, a reminder that life is both beautiful and finite, scientific and divine, and fragile yet enduring. Seated on a promontory overlooking a moonlit sea is our solitary figure, a 6-year-old Charles William Lambton. Better known as the Red Boy, this painting was commissioned by the boy's father, John George Lambton, a member of Parliament for County Durham. It was painted by Sir Thomas Lawrence, one of Europe's leading portraitists of the late 18th and early 19th centuries. For this piece, Lawrence may have drawn inspiration not just from his own imagination, but from poetry, that of Lord Byron, William Wordsworth, or perhaps even lines he himself had written, such as, "Proceed, dear boy, and climb the hill. Enjoy the morning of thy time, and all the rocks of future life, as cheerful and as active climb." That sense of ascent through life is here in this painting too. The setting is of a high vantage point, a cliff or perhaps a mountain, beneath a moonlit sky and above a roaring shore. We see the sublime here. Nature looms larger than the child. It dwarfs him, inviting both fear and awe. Then there's the striking red of the boy's clothing. You probably noticed it immediately. It gives him his individuality, a presence within this magnificent landscape. But did you know that it wasn't always red? Originally, Lawrence painted it yellow, but later changed it to this rich orange-red color. That decision has shifted how we read the painting, as the original shade would most likely cloak our figure as one with nature, rather than the protagonist he is. The loose-fitting velvet style of his suit reflects the contemporary fashion for children of the time, which was designed to allow for movement and play. We can see this style appear in several of the artist's portraits of young sitters. Further marking his youth are the small yellow flowers, painted in chromium yellow, that are growing next to his knee. They are placing him at the beginning of his life. That sense of beginning is difficult to separate from what followed. Lambton died of tuberculosis at the age of 13, and so the image takes on a different weight in retrospect. Lawrence's oeuvre was central to the development of the Romantic movement's portraiture genre. His paintings moved beyond likeness of the sitters to include the mood and temperament of the entire scene, reflecting the Romantic movement's advocacy for subjective perception. When the painting was exhibited at the Royal Academy in 1825, the critics praised it for its simple action and sweet expression of infantile nature. Its warm reception continued even beyond its initial display. In 1967, a century and a half later, it became the first painting to be reproduced on a British postage stamp. This extended its reach far beyond the gallery halls and into the day-to-day of 20th century England, where encountered in ordinary moments, its subject quietly prompted reflection on the precarious nature of the current of life. Hanging in the same room as Seurat's Bathers at Asnières, this painting is by one of the lesser-known artists within the art history canon. So what makes it stand out? The Kien Valley with the Bluemlisalp Massif was painted by the Swiss artist Ferdinand Hodler, who specialized in mountain landscapes, shaped both by his upbringing and his artistic training. Being one of 13 children, Ferdinand was put to work at a young age, assisting his stepfather in painting signs and other commercial projects. At 18, he moved to Geneva and became a student of Barthélemy Men, a friend of Camille Corot, who helped Hodler refine his vision of Switzerland that was untouched by human presence. This is one of several paintings he made in the Bernese Oberland, a sub-range of the Swiss Alps, showing the Kien Valley and the Bluemlisalp Mountains in the distance. The composition is of a lush valley that stretches forward before closing in on the mountain at its peak. In reality, this mountain is about 3.5 kilometers high, but here, Hodler compresses that full spatial experience onto a two-dimensional canvas extending just over 1 meter. He does this through foreshortening, a technique that follows how our eyes perceive forms extending into depth. Look at the foreground. We can see small wildflowers just inches from the ground. And then at the top of the composition, the mountain extends well into the distance. Bringing that entire range into a single frame is an accomplishment in itself, made even more striking by the canvas's unusual vertical format, which runs against the horizontal conventions of landscape paintings. What we are looking at is an ancient landscape, and yet the handling of it feels active and modern. The surface is painted with concentrated greens layered with intensity so that the brushstrokes seem to pulse, guiding our gaze around the scene. That movement settles as we reach the dark blues of the mountains and the light blues of the sky. The white clouds drifting above frame this place of rest. Hodler painted with the intention of including only what he called the essential structure of the landscape, liberated from all unimportant details. He saw nature as patterns of rhythm and repetition, By simplifying its forms, he lets the structure come forward so that the scene reads not just as a place, but as an arrangement of movement, with moments of stillness and of action, nature's beating heart. Edouard Manet's Music in the Tuileries garden places us at the center of Paris. So what is happening here? We see men in top hats and black coats standing among seated women and playing children, gathered beneath the shade of chestnut trees. The crowd is distributed across the canvas almost like a frieze, yet there's no single focal point. They carry the appearance of wealth and fashion, not unlike a monarch's court, and yet there's no hierarchy. No one dominates the scene. The figures extend outward into the distance and press against the edges of the canvas. Notice how they are abruptly cropped, which gives the sense that this scene continues beyond what we can see. It's as if we're walking by and only catch a fragment of the scene, and the rest exists just outside our view. The people here have gathered for a concert, as the title tells us, and yet the musicians themselves are absent. Has the performance begun? Has it ended, or is it happening just outside our field of vision? Manet also includes himself in the composition. We can see him on the left, partially obscured behind his studio partner and fellow painter, Albert de Balleroy. The crowd is made up of Manet's friends, family, and acquaintances, a sort of group portrait of the people in his life. By placing himself at the margins, a decision that recalls Diego Velázquez, Manet complicates the relationship between the observer and the observed. Where we are is supposedly where the musicians would be, but also we occupy the space of the artist painting this scene. And yet the artist is here in front of us within the scene, looking outward. It's an impossible situation, carefully designed by the artist. Manet was closely connected to the poet Charles Baudelaire, who argued that modernity is the transient, the fleeting, the contingent. And visual artists specifically had the power to capture these fleeting appearances to find the eternal in the transitory. That idea shaped how Manet approached this painting. Look at the composition. Some areas appear unfinished, reduced to abbreviated forms, while others are more fully resolved. The surface does not present itself as complete in the conventional sense. Instead, it reads more like a moment caught in passing. The painting captures how we view the world in real life. Not every detail is fully registered. Manet has fixed a passing scene from memory, retained its energy and immediacy, and has done away with the traditional techniques of refining it into something idealized, something too stable to be real. When it was exhibited in 1867 at the Universal Exhibition in Paris, it mainly received negative critiques. People were unsettled by its contemporary everyday subject matter, the thickness of its brushstrokes, and the roughness of its finish. And yet today, for the very same reasons, when historians look back at this painting, they see it as one of the earliest examples of modern art. The works we saw today, along with even more that we didn't, remind us of the power in wandering through art history beyond what's commonly celebrated and venerated. That possibility of discovery, of seeing something unexpected, is one of the most compelling reasons to stroll through the room slowly and let your gaze linger wherever it might fall. So when you next visit a museum or gallery, try taking your time and stray off the beaten path. You never know what lesser-known stories you might encounter along the way. For anyone who wants to keep learning, I also write a series of longer articles on Substack. That's where we unpack the terms, the context, and the stories behind art in more detail.